All right, welcome back, everybody, to Bio 153. We are streaming online. Here we are live, coming right from my house here, as we go through our last chapter, believe it or not, in our lecture notes, chapter 29, which we're going to be discussing pregnancy, human development, aging, and then, unfortunately, at the end is death. So we kind of look at the circle of life when we look at chapter 29. So here we go, for better or for worse, but definitely for better. All right, so here we go. And we start off really on this first slide looking at some definitions. So of course, pregnancy. So this is referring to the time frame of fertilization until the infant is born, is the time frame of pregnancy. Another term that's important to be aware of is what's known as gestation. So sometimes you hear about this being the gestational period. This would be from the last menstrual period that the woman would experience until the birth of the child. So roughly around 280 days. Embryo, this would be the time frame of fertilization through week 8. And then fetus, the fetal time frame, would be from week 9 till eventually birth of the child. So first we take a look at fertilization. And during vaginal sex, a lot of sperm is released into the female, into the vagina. And many of these sperm will die in the vagina because of the very low pH. It's very acidic in the vagina. And so that leads to death of many of the sperm. Some of the sperm are detected as foreign material, antigens. And so the immune system of the woman will actually lead to many of the sperm also being killed through phagocytosis. But there are some sperm that do survive and make their way out of the vagina and up the cervix to the uterus, into the uterine tube, to the ampulla area, that region where the sperm will encounter the egg. So a few hundred sperm, you can see here I have roughly 200 sperm that will actually reach the site of fertilization, the ampulla, where the sperm will encounter the egg. So you have all these sperm that are bouncing off the egg, but only the strongest sperm, the fittest, the most determined, will make it through the outer layers of the egg and make it right into the internal area of the egg, again referring to oocyte. The sperm is able to go ahead and make it through some of those outer cell layers. Here we can see the sperm. And it's able to make its way into the interior of the oocyte, the egg, because of the helmet egg-like structure that sperm contain, known as the acrosome. The acrosome contains these hydrolytic enzymes that ultimately allow for the sperm to penetrate the outer layers of the egg. By doing so, then, the DNA, it's in the head of the sperm, like here, will go ahead, make its way in. So here's the nucleus, that's the DNA. Here we have the midpiece, mitochondria here. And so the two nuclei will come together, and ultimately fertilization will take place. And we have a fertilized egg here, which is known as the zygote. The zygote. So we start with the egg, the secondary oocyte, because hence ovulation is taking place in both ovaries. This becomes what's known as an ovum to a pronuclei, and hence when the two nuclei come together, sperm nucleus, egg nucleus, the time of conception, they come together, form the zygote, and the zygote again is defined as the fertilized egg. This image is taking a look now at the early stages of development. So once again, here we have the ovary, and we can see the stages of follicle development right here. And when ovulation takes place, the adult follicle ruptures and the oocyte, the egg, is expelled. And this then, at day 14, when this occurs, the oocyte will go through the fimbriae and pass the infundibulum, and eventually, this is the ampulla region again right here. So ampulla region right here. And this is where the sperm will be bouncing off the egg. And then eventually, of course, one sperm is healthy and strong enough to penetrate through the layers of the oocyte egg, and ultimately the site of fertilization, again known as the ampulla. So fertilization taking place here. So now we form what's known as the zygote. The zygote then will make its way down the uterine tube, the fallopian tube. And along the way, a series of mitotic division will take place. One stage is known as cleavage. Cleavage is defined as the 4-cell stage of mitosis. So now, this 4-cell structure, cleavage, will eventually have more and more mitotic division taking place, to eventually you get to what's known as the morula. The morula contains 16 or more cells at this point, so lots of mitosis is taking place before the morula will make its way out of the fallopian tube into the uterus. And at the fundus of the uterus, the superior portion here now, we have formed now what's known as an early blastocyst, before eventually this structure becoming the blastocyst. And the blastocyst, so this structure right here, at about 7 days after fertilization, the blastocyst now will implant into the body of the uterus in the innermost wall layer known as the endometrium. And this is where implantation will take place of the blastocyst. So implantation will take place a week after fertilization in the endometrium, innermost lining wall layer of the uterus. Here we have another picture showing the implantation process. So here's this blastocyst right here. Again, this takes 7 days after fertilization, this process of implantation. Again, the blastocyst attaching to the endometrium. And at this point, there's a lot of different cells here, especially in this inner cell mass. And these are all stem cells early on. And these stem cells can evolve into any human body system it wants to. So these cells may become part of the nervous system or the skeletal system or the muscular system, digestive, etc. So we look at, well, what does the term blastocyst really mean? So blastocyst, right here, this term, blastocyst, refers to a pre-embryo. So roughly around 100 cells. This is the structure that implants into the endometrium. So there are a variety of different structures that make up the blastocyst. One type of structure is the inner cell mass. The inner cell mass. The inner cell mass is made up of a variety of different types of cells again. These cells are, at this time, defined as stem cells. So all these cells right here. And these cells eventually, like I mentioned previous, will become the various human systems of the body. And this will eventually become embryo, then fetus, and then baby. This outer ring of cells found here is referring to what's known as the trophoblast. The trophoblast. The trophoblast, these cells, will become the extraembryonic membrane, which in turn eventually will become the placenta. Here we can see the eroding of the blastocyst approximately now about 12 days after fertilization. So now we're getting closer to 2 weeks afterwards. And again, this inner cell mass will become eventually that embryo. And we can see some additional cells that are starting to form now. A new cell layer we have here is known as the cytotrophoblast. Cytotrophoblast, these inner layer of cells. So cytotrophoblast. So cytotrophoblast, this vicinity here. Another outer layer of cells that we can see here is what's known as the overall cytotrophoblast, and very outer layer of cells that actually will digest the endometrium. So we can see that here, kind of in the brown. Right here, you can see that here. All right, here's our first set of review questions for today. So question number 1 for review. Implantation occurs on what day after fertilization? Implantation occurs on what day after fertilization? So what would be the correct answer here? All right, and the correct answer here, I would probably go with choice letter B. So 7 days. 7 days. Okay, our next review question, number 2. The blastocyst implants into this wall layer of the uterus, which is called the what? So what would be the correct answer here? And the correct answer would be choice letter A, the endometrium. The endometrium. So this picture is kind of cool. We're seeing the various stages of human development. So letter A, like we mentioned again, is that fertilized egg, the zygote. So this yellow structure here almost looks like a sun, but believe it or not, it's the zygote. Doesn't look like much. This picture, letter B, is kind of sweet. We're seeing the blastocyst, the structure right here, which is implanting into the endometrium. And then here we have an embryo here at 7 weeks. So it kind of looks human, but, early on, who knows? Could be a turtle, pig, chicken. But, yep, it's going to be human, especially when we see the fetus here at month number 5. So now we're going to take a look at a process known as gastrulation. Gastrulation. And this is referring to ultimately forming our three basic germ layers. So this comes about because in the blastocyst, we have that inner cell mass again, the variety of stem cells. So like right here. And eventually the inner cell mass will evolve into the embryonic disc. So the embryonic disc, referring to this vicinity here. And the embryonic disc, in turn, will evolve into the germ layers. So we can see that here, the germ layers. So we have all the germ layers here. So referring to the ectoderm, mesoderm, and endoderm. And those are our three basic germ layers, which ultimately become the human body systems. So here we take a look at our three basic germ layers. So here they are, the three basic primary germ layers. First, we have the ectoderm. This is the outer layer. So from this layer, we have a lot of our more, per se, superficial structures, such as layers of skin, like the outer layer, the epidermis. Hair also evolves from this, along with nails, our oil and sweat glands. So when we think of our various sebaceous glands and things like that. Your nervous system evolves from the ectoderm, along with mammary glands. The middle layer is mesoderm. So meso referring to middle. So your skeletal system, muscles come from this layer, along with bones, heart, kidneys, and gonads, ovaries and testes. And then the most internal layer is the endoderm. Endo means internal. So endoderm, your gut, digestive system, the urinary system minus the kidneys, respiratory system, and even some of the accessory digestive organs, pancreas and liver, come about from the endoderm. So very important to make sure that you know your three germ layers. So make sure to know what structures evolve from these layers. We're now going to take a look at some very important hormones here that are critical for detection of pregnancy. And the critical hormone that we're talking about here is the human chorionic gonadotropin. Human chorionic gonadotropin. This is abbreviated as the HCG. This is the hormone that's detected during a pregnancy test. So when the woman gets a positive reading, it's ultimately the detection of this particular hormone, indication that she's pregnant. So we can see early on that this hormone spikes significantly, plays a very critical role during the first trimester. The reason for that is for ultimately maintenance for the endometrium. And the corpus luteum, like we mentioned, is producing progesterone and estrogen. HCG secreted by the trophoblast cells that were, of course, part of the blastocyst. But eventually this hormone declines and estrogen and progesterone levels start to go up in significant number because of the amount of production of this hormone from the placenta, because now the placenta is formed and very critical when it comes to the second and third trimesters for production of progesterone and estrogen. We're now going to take a moment to look at twins, as it's important for you to know a little bit about twins. So first we're going to take a look at identical twins. So identical twins are going to be the same gender, and genetic information will be nearly 100%. How this takes place, the identical twins, is fertilization of a single egg oocyte by one sperm. And what happens then is during the early stages of mitotic development is these cells undergoing mitosis then separate during the morula stage. And you end up then with twins. And there might be a little sheath separating them early on in the cell. And so, being that they're identical, again, features almost right on. Same level of intelligence, because intelligence is genetically related. Same risk factors for diseases, and so on and so forth. A very rare type of twin are called the conjoined twins. So this is where the splitting of the embryo is incomplete. This is a very, very rare phenomenon. I've never met conjoined twins before. I've met identical twins, of course, but never conjoined twins. So here we can see that these twins are connected by the head. So imagine being connected to your twin's head. You can imagine how risky this surgery can be since they're sharing the same brain. But it has been done before. So one of the first successful separations of conjoined twins actually took place at Johns Hopkins University in Baltimore, Maryland. And the physician that did that, the neurosurgeon, his name was Dr. Ben Carson, who did that successfully. So very rare, very risky to separate the twins from the head. There can also be conjoined twins that are connected at the waist. That can, of course, be risky too. Not as risky, but still risky to separate them, as they're sharing a lot of the same vital organs. The next type of twins we're probably very familiar with, we probably have all seen, of course, are the fraternal twins. The conditions here, they can be the same gender or different gender, and genetic information is different. And that is because they're formed because of two eggs, oocytes, that are released from the ovaries and fertilized by different sperm. One thing to note about twins, too, is that there's an increase in having twins when you have children later on. So that increases that probability if the woman's having children later in life in her 30s or 40s. Continuing on, we now take a look at formation of structures in the embryo, looking at 4.5 weeks. So, one important structure to be aware of here is known as the chorion. The chorion. And this is known as the outermost membrane, right here. And this ultimately in time evolves into the placenta. There are also what are known as extraembryonic membranes, which will help to protect the embryo and nourishment. Other structures we'll talk about very soon. You can see here in the red. We jump along now, and now we're at the fetal stage, 13 weeks. So, some of these important structures. First, we'll take a look at what's known as the yolk sac. The yolk sac is the yellow structure that you see here in the picture. We saw that also previous, so in the yellow. And this structure, the yolk sac, is the early blood cell formation. It also is a digestive tube and contains primordial germ cells. And what we're referring to here is this structure contains stem cells of sperm and the egg. So spermatogonium and oogonium. Another important structure to know is what's known as the amnion. So the amniotic cavity. And this ultimately provides protection for the fetus, and this overall cavity helps to maintain a constant temperature for the fetus. We can also see the umbilical cord. So this is linking embryo, linking the fetus to the placenta for nourishment from mother. We also have, of course, the placenta indicated here we've mentioned, but also what's known as the chorionic villi. And this is where nutrient gas exchange can occur between mother and fetus. All right, the next thing we're going to take a look at is the process of organogenesis. And this is referring to the forming of body organs and systems. This is an extremely sensitive time frame during fetal development. And so it's very important that mom takes care of herself when she's pregnant in order to increase the chances of a healthy pregnancy and baby. So there are various items that mom should stay away from when she's pregnant. So we look at a new term today, which is known as teratogens. Teratogens. Teratogens are factors that may cause severe congenital abnormalities or even death. So these would be alcohol. So mother should not be drinking alcohol when she's pregnant. Mother also should not be taking anything that has nicotine in it. So mom should not be smoking cigarettes, cigars, pipes. So very important that mom's not smoking. Also important that mom's not taking drugs. And infections are not good either. So it's important that mom tries to stay as healthy as possible. It's important that mom really limits the medication she's taking too, because it could lead to significant birth defects. One common medication that was given to women back in the 1950s and 60s was a medication you can see here known as the thalidomide. Thalidomide was a medication given to women to help with morning sickness. But little did they know, unfortunately, even the various pharmaceutical companies, chemical plants, etc., that a lot of the children were being born sterile from women taking thalidomide when they were pregnant. There were also children being born with arm and leg deformities, where maybe they were only born with one finger, or maybe a toe, or maybe the leg wasn't even there, or the arm. So hence, that medication had to obviously be banned. Here we're taking a look at major birth defects in various systems of the body if mom is exposed to teratogens. And what we can see here, based off the bar graph, the orange portion of the bar graph shows harmful agents that cause major birth defects, and the purple here would be harmful agents causing minor birth defects. So based off of this graph, the number one location of birth defects in children is the central nervous system. So this can significantly be altered if mom's drinking alcohol or taking drugs or smoking during the pregnancy. You can see here, like ears can be affected, so maybe ears aren't formed all the way. Child's born deaf, or eyes, maybe eyes don't form all the way. So the number one spot where there's birth defects here is the central nervous system. We're now going to talk about the fetal stage of development more. This is the time frame of month 3 to month 9, a very rapid time of growth. And the fetus can grow from 1 inch to 14 inches, so up to 7 pounds, eventually even more. And ultimately at birth, the fetus is 22 inches. We now look at the effects of pregnancy that take place. So one change that the woman will experience is her reproductive organs. The reproductive organs will be engorged with blood during the pregnancy, and the vagina will turn colors. It will become more of a purplish hue color in preparation for being the birth canal. Also, the breast will enlarge in size as they're going to prepare for eventually lactation, for milk production. the uterus is going to significantly increase in size as the fetus is getting bigger and bigger and bigger. Some women will also experience back pain, known as lordosis, typically affecting the lumbar region of her back. And so it's very important that mom is not lifting heavy things, not doing any type of strain on her body. This picture here is showing the relative size of the uterus before conception and during the pregnancy. So early on, the uterus is about the size of a fist. So imagine that, holding up your fist. This gives you an idea of the size of a woman's uterus. But during the pregnancy then, the uterus gets bigger and bigger. You can see it month number 4, month number 7, and then if the mother goes through the entire pregnancy, all 9 months, the uterus gets really big. The top of the uterus, the fundus, can almost reach the xiphoid process. We now look at more hormones. You're probably thinking, oh, we've already went through so many hormones, we got to go through more. Well, yeah, it's really important to know your hormones for the final exam. So here we take a look at placenta hormones. The first one we're going to take a look at in here today is the human placenta lactogen. So the human placenta lactogen. And this HPL is important for maturation of the breast, for lactation, and also is important for glucose sparing of the mother. So ultimately, this hormone will assist with food being diverted to the fetus. The next hormone that's important to know is the human chorionic thyrotropin. This ultimately will increase the metabolism for the mother. And so her metabolism is going to increase significantly. Mom's going to be more hungry than ever before as the food is going to baby. And number 3, the last hormone here is relaxin. So this hormone will cause the pelvic ligaments, the pubic symphysis joint to relax and widen, ultimately becoming ready for birth, for the birth canal. So make sure to know these 3 hormones here. We now take a look at labor. So ultimately, there's a lot of unknowns still with labor, but we take a look at what we know so far. Typically, estrogen levels are going to be very high in the woman. And ultimately, these high levels of estrogen can induce oxytocin receptors on the uterus. So oxytocin, a new hormone we're going to take a look at in here today. And so oxytocin is a big trigger for ultimately labor. We talked about the hormone progesterone and how progesterone was ultimately going to quiet the uterus. So that way there was no spontaneous abortion happening. And it quiets the uterus. But not so with oxytocin. So when it's time to get ready for birth, labor, progesterone levels decline and oxytocin levels go up. And oxytocin produced in the mother's brain goes to the uterus, goes to that myometrium, thick middle layer, and ultimately leads to that uterus contracting. And this can lead to very, very strong, vigorous contractions of the uterus because of the critical hormone oxytocin. Now, some women sometimes have false labor contractions, and those are highlighted here, known as the Braxton-Hicks contractions. So some women have that, where they feel, oh, baby's coming, but ultimately ends up being a false alarm. We now take a look at the stages of labor. There are 3 major stages to the labor process So first we look at stage 1. During stage 1, this is known as dilation. There's an early and late. I just categorize that still as stage 1. So here's early. This is typically the longest stage of labor. It can be 6 to 12 hours or even longer. It just depends on the woman. And during this time frame with the contractions, it will continue on until the cervix is fully dilated. So the cervix here, and baby hopefully going out head first instead of jumping out feet first. Here we have stage 1 again continuing on. This is the dilation late time frame. And here the cervix will soften and thin and will dilate to 10 centimeters. You also have engagement taking place where the head will enter into the true pelvis. So here we can see that, the cervix softening here, and ultimately baby is going to come out. This is also the time frame where the expression "my water broke" occurred, where the amniotic cavity has burst open, releasing fluid, and it's time to go to the hospital unless you're going to give birth at home. Stage 2 of labor. This is known as the expulsion. This is when baby comes into this world. Very strong contractions will take place with baby. There will be a big urge to push, and the crowning of the head will take place, and ultimately, delivering of the child. The time frame of expulsion. But after this, we are not done yet. There's still one thing that has to occur. Yes, baby's out into this world, but we still have that placenta that's inside mom. Hence, we look at stage 3 of labor, the placenta stage. So during this time frame, the placenta and fetal membranes will come out about 30 minutes after birth. So that placenta will detach from the overall wall of the uterus, and that's known as the placenta stage. So once the placenta comes out, hence we've gone through the 3 stages of labor. And there's a lot that can be done with the placenta. Some women may donate their placenta to science. Maybe it's used in a classroom in college. Some women donate their placenta likewise to science, but can be utilized for stem cell research. Other women are very attached to the placenta and might use it for fertilizer around a tree. And I've even heard of some women, friends of mine, who have actually decided to cook up their placenta and eat it. So a lot of things can be utilized with the placenta. So baby's now into this world, and most babies come out head first, which is healthy. But some babies, there's difficulty with the pregnancy and labor. Some babies may decide to come out feet first instead, and might even get their head wrapped around the umbilical cord. So that's when you need to have a C-section performed. So a cesarean is going to be utilized. The breech birth is when baby is born butt first. So there's a lot of adjustments that need to be made for the baby during this neonatal period of a couple weeks. Baby must learn to maintain body temperature. And so baby will cry if baby needs to be warm, or maybe baby's too warm. Baby will urinate and defecate. And baby's hungry. Baby needs to eat. Another thing to consider is the breathing of baby. So that first breath taking place with those respiratory control centers up in the pons medulla oblongata. And early on, that respiratory rate of baby is going to be around 45 breaths per minute during the first couple weeks. So these are some of the adjustments that baby needs to do in this world for survival. We now take a look at more hormones, and we look at, again, the process of lactation, which again is referring to milk production taking place in the mammary glands. There's a variety of different hormones that play a big role here. The two that we're going to focus in on today is looking at the hormones prolactin and oxytocin. So prolactin and oxytocin. Prolactin, this hormone, plays an important role in promoting milk production, which takes place about 3 days after the pregnancy. And then the hormone oxytocin, we've talked about oxytocin already. It has a variety of different functions. Here, oxytocin stimulates the milk ejection. So for promoting milk production through prolactin, before actual milk comes out, there's actually an early substance that comes out in regards to forming of milk. And I'll write that term out for you. The term we're referring to here is what's known as the colostrum. Colostrum. So that is COLOSTRUM. So colostrum. So that's a substance that initially comes out of the mammary glands, and then from that eventually then we have milk being produced. So we take a look now at the advantages of breast milk and breastfeeding. And ultimately, this is a decision up to the mother if she wants to breastfeed or not. But here we look at the pros and cons between breast milk versus cow's milk. One advantage of breastfeeding is that the fats and iron are more easily absorbed, and amino acids from the breast milk versus cow's milk. Also, a lot of the beneficial chemicals that we find in breastfeeding, especially when we consider the various items listed here, like the antibody IgA and complement and interferon, right? Those antimicrobial proteins. And instantly will boost the immune system of baby. And a lot of this immune system boosting, again, is also because of early on the release of the colostrum, again, which, if you didn't catch it last time, COLOSTRUM, colostrum. And then another benefit to breastfeeding is that it's natural laxative and encourages healthy bacterial colonization of the large intestine. So having a lot of those healthy bacteria living in the colon, those microbes, which is really important. So a lot of benefits here. All right, we're now going to review one more time as we go ahead and go through our eye clicker review. So here is our first review question. So skeletal muscle, bone, and the heart evolved from the primary germ layer called the what? So what would be the correct answer here? What would be the correct answer here? And the correct answer here for germ layers would be choice letter B, the mesoderm, that middle layer. Number 4 for review. During embryonic development, the blank is the most prone to birth defects due to teratogens. And the correct answer here, I would probably go with choice letter A, the central nervous system. Number 5 for review. During the process of lactation, the hormone blank promotes milk production about 3 days after pregnancy. So, what would be the correct answer here? And the correct answer would be choice letter C, the hormone prolactin. So imagine now that baby ages and baby grows. And we all have to go through this aging process, unfortunately. That's just the way life is. And aging starts approximately in your mid-20s. And a lot of this depends upon genetics and stress. So lots of fun stuff. Yay! Our hair turns gray. And thinning of hair, so people go bald. Wrinkles start to come in. Reduced muscle mass. Loss of bone density, don't fall. Urinary system declines. Might be a little more difficult to go to the bathroom. We lose our memory. What did I just say? A decrease in metabolism. Keep exercising. A decline in your senses. Might lose your vision, hearing, taste, and smell. Cardiovascular system declines. Less viable sperm. Women go through menopause. All these things happen because of aging. So we all go through this process of aging, and then eventually we pass away, as life is a fatal disease. So congratulations, you've made it through all the notes this semester. It's been a good time, and there you go. So remember, for your final exam, it's over these last 3 chapters. So make sure to review chapter 27 for the final exam, which goes through fluids and electrolytes, and chemistry, acid-base balance. Make sure to review chapter 28, the reproductive system for the male and female systems and sexual development, and this final chapter, chapter 29, on pregnancy and aging.